What's up everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Orlando Martel and this is Martel Dynamics. Today we're going to read chapter 4 of Rickson Gracie's book, Breathe, the Unfettered Mind. This chapter is continuous with the theme in the last chapters, which is basically how Rickson grew from the Gracie family and into his own man, but still within the family tradition. So this chapter begins with Helio Gracie, his father, getting a call of an old friend asking him if he had some fighter in mind that could fight this other fighter that apparently had been undefeated, is a stronger fighter there is, and no one can beat him. We are currently in the 1980s, more or less years, and this fighter hasn't lost since supposedly the 1960s. So it's like a 20-year career without being defeated. This fighter is called King Zulu. King Zulu was, at the time, a 33-year-old, stood 6'4 feet, weighed 230 pounds, and as I said, supposedly had not lost since 1963. This specific chapter gives this part of Rickson's life, the King Zulu fight, almost 10 pages just to this King Zulu affair, because as I understood it, it's a very important point in Rickson's life, because this King Zulu guy was much bigger than Rickson Gracie, much experienced, much heavier. It was just a traditional David versus Goliath, affair. It was, nobody expected, even Rickson himself didn't expect it to win this, and spoiler alert, Rickson Gracie won the fight. But this fight alone was a transformation for Rickson. How can you prepare yourself mentally to fight someone that will beat you 99% of the time, because he's everything that you're not? So it took Rickson mental training, and he was very fearful of the situation, but he went with it anyways, because he had his father Helio Gracie and his brother Holz Gracie by his side, which, by the way, I think we talked about it in the last chapter, that besides his father, Holz, his older brother, is Rickson's most respected brother. There's this very terrifying scene, and just another thing. The bell rang and King Zulu charged across the canvas ring. I held my ground until the last second and threw a brutal knee to his face as he tackled me. Although he took me down, I was sure I had knocked him out, and was thinking about how I would celebrate my first professional victory. Imagine my surprise when King Zulu stood up, shook his head, and spat out teeth and blood, and charged again. Imagine giving a whole knee blow to somebody's face, full blown out of boom, and the other man just shakes his head, spits blood and teeth in his own teeth, and just keeps fighting. I mean, how fucking terrifying that must be. Nonetheless, Rickson kept fighting. There came a moment where Rickson was just tired. When I returned to my corner, covered in Zulu's blood, I wondered if it was even possible to hurt this monster. "Throw in the towel, I'm dead," I said to my dad. At first, Helio just ignored me and then said, "You're doing great, he's more tired than you are." When I said, "No, Dad, I'm serious," he cut me off and said, "No, he's in much worse shape than you. You're going to kick his ass." We started arguing, and then Holz dumped a bucket full of ice and water on my head. That shocked me back to my senses. As I was gasping for breath, the bell rang. As I spoiled you before, Rickson Gracie won the fight. It says that after struggling for a beat on our feet, I eventually wrestled King Zulu to the ground. Immediately took his bag and began to elbow him in the head and back off the neck. Then I sunk a choke, and what had been hell for just 3 minutes before turned to pure bliss. When I won, the crowd was stunned. So that was a big part of this chapter, King Zulu. I mean, I'm just summarizing that part of the chapter for you because, as I said, it's almost 10 pages. But that was very transformative for Rickson's life to just, that gave him a lot of confidence, first of all, and second of all, it taught him that you can't be just negative all the time. You have to believe in yourself, even if you think you'll lose. Give everything you've got. So Rickson says it himself. It says that this fight exposed me to the most primal kind of fear that comes from within. Who wouldn't find that fear? You know, when you're fighting someone that will almost definitely beat you. So at this point in his life, he says that, in his own words, he is prepared physically and mentally, but not spiritually and emotionally, which I think most people would include the spirituality and emotionality of things in the mental things, but he differentiates them. He says he was prepared physically and mentally, but not emotionally and spiritually. What he did was he then met by chances in his life the one he says that besides his father and host is his most influential teacher, and that is Orlando Canny. Canny was developing a system of movement that one day would be called biogymnastica. Canny believed that the modern man had become disconnected from his body because he had been taught to think instead of feel. Rickson says that most people assume that there is a clear dividing line between the mind and the body, but there isn't. Their relationship is much more symbiotic and complex. This Orlando Canny man was teaching Rickson everything from feeling to breathing. Rickson actually says that the most important thing that Orlando Canny taught him was how to control his breathing. All the pictures you see of Rickson Gracie just, doing this shit and breathing and pushing his stomach all the way in is from this biogymnastica technique that he learned from Orlando Canny. Orlando Canny taught him not just to breathe and this feeling thing, but he taught Rickson to concentrate so much. He says he would lose himself in whatever he was doing, in his meditations, in his training, so that he didn't fight anymore thinking of technique or losing or even winning. He fought, and all he had in his mind was to just connect in a spiritual sense of some kind, in a conscious sense, with his opponent, so that then he could dominate his opponent. I know this all sounds mystic and shit, but it's literally what he says. Regarding breathing, Rickson says that once I started to learn the mechanics of breathing and how to apply them, my sprint became twice as long as my opponent's sprint. Yet my recovery time was 3 to 4 times faster. I learned that if my opponent's heart rate was at 80 to 90 beats per minute and mine was 60, in no time he would be at 120 while I'd be only at 90. Soon he'd be at 150 and I'd still only be at 100 beats per minute. That was when his panic would set in, when he realized that he needed a break and I didn't. As I said before, Rickson says that with the exception of my father, Helio, and my brother, Hose, Orlando Canny was the most important teacher of my life. Besides Canny, here the chapter makes a twist. Rickson says that while he admired many sports players, let's say, while he admired the soccer player Pelé, the swimmer Mark Spitz, and other great athletes, in his words, I was inspired most by the greatest Brazilian race car driver of all time, Ayrton Senna. Apparently, Rickson and Senna were basically the same age, and there were similarities, according to Rickson, in their training methodology and outlook on competition. And of course, it would be expected because they were both very competitive. Rickson took a lot from Ayrton Senna and was, it says he broke his heart when Ayrton Senna had a crash in 1996? No, in 1994, Ayrton Senna had a really bad, a horrible crash and where he died. So the chapter basically ends with this situation. Rickson had been falling in love with this woman named Kim. He came to a point in his life where his relationship had gotten serious and they want to be married and have kids in the future. But Rickson had one thing in particular that he wanted to practice in his life in comparison to his father regarding women, and is that his father Helio and his uncle Carlos didn't think of women as a partner and an active player in their life. They thought of women as just a tool for them to have children, specifically sons, for them teach them jiu-jitsu and have this army of jiu-jitsu fighters. Rickson saw that, and Rickson specifically how that affected the women in their life. Specifically, Rickson says that he would sometimes come to his home and see his mother crying, just crying in a corner, you know, just quietly suffering. And he would ask, what's going on, Mom? And she would just say, no, nothing, I'm fine. As you know, women, when they say, I'm fine, they are obviously not fine. He knew that she was suffering, because one time his father just came to him and said, hey, Rickson, think about it. Would you like more brothers? And Rickson, he was like 14 years old, he says in the chapter. Rickson says that, yeah, I would like some more brothers. Okay, come with me, said Helio. And they went to the apartment of this woman who worked in the academy. And when she opened the door just a tiny bit, a crack, a face appeared, and then another, and then another. It was like 3 to 4 more kids. And Helio said, they're your brother. Helio didn't even mention to Rickson's mother that he wanted more children, more kids. He just went to another woman and had like 4 more kids. It's not that Helio didn't respect his woman, but that he didn't appreciate them. He didn't think twice about them. According to Rickson, he just thought of women as just, you know, I'm going to procreate with them and that's it. Rickson keeps saying in the book, Helio and Carlos Gracie were just stuck in time, because I think he says that they even thought of sex as just a tool to procreate and not to enjoy, which Rickson says was crazy to him, and that he didn't want to, you know, practice that philosophy. When it came to his own relationship with Kim, he took it very seriously. When Kim got pregnant with their first son, Rickson, they had 2 sons, Rickson Gracie, which is written Rickson Gracie, and Kron Gracie. When Kim got pregnant, she delivered the baby. Rickson did everything he could to help her in the first days so she could recover in peace. But when she delivered his first son, the Sunday of that week, he had an important fight with this character, or just man, named Sergio Pena, which at the time was the latest jiu-jitsu phenomenon, you know. So naturally, Rickson had to fight him. Long story short, Rickson beat the out of him. That basically ended the jiu-jitsu attraction to Rickson. Rickson says that jiu-jitsu tournaments were getting less and less interesting to him, because I can imagine that if you keep winning and there's no challenge to you, then you would naturally look for something harder or something that seems a challenge to you. Even though the beginning of the 1980s were full of good news, the year of 1982 was a bittersweet one, because in that year, we talked that Hose, his brother, was a very adventurous man, and he wanted to do everything, and no matter if it was dangerous, he liked to do that. And Hose liked to hand glide in, I don't know how that sport's called, but the point is, it's a dangerous sport. And one day when the conditions were very bad, because there was no wind, or certainly there was too much wind, even though people were telling him not go and do that because it was, very dangerous. It says that Hose ran down the ramp, launched initially, got some lift, but then began to spiral, and he hit the ground 90 yards from the ramp. His friend ran into the overgrown forest and found my brother hanging upside down with his eyes wide open. Although he looked perfectly fine, his neck was broken and Hose was dead. Naturally, this was horrible news, because I haven't read the next chapter, but Hose was the bridge between Helio Gracie and Carlos Gracie. And as you may imagine or know, families remain united because of specific members of the family that unites them. And when those members are not there anymore, people start to deviate into their own plans or their own sides of the family. The chapter ends Rickson saying when Hose died, there wasn't a bridge anymore between the sons of Carlos Gracie and the sons of Rickson Gracie. And I can imagine that at that point in the Gracie family, everyone was just one single Gracie family. And I'll have to read the next chapter and finish the book to see, but today you can see a lot of Gracie academies, and yes, they are the same family, but they're not as close as they once were. So guys, that was chapter 4 of Rickson Gracie's book. The title was The Unfettered Mind. Next chapter is Steel Sharpens Steel. So without further ado and without further talk, I'll see you in the next chapter. Bye.